Hi, my name is Paul Elliott, and if you want to learn more about my plays and about the ALAP Pride Festival in Hollywood, listen to this video. I don't know of any other time in my life that I wasn't interested in theater. We had in elementary school carnivals, and we had a thing called the Tom Thumb Wedding. Now, the Tom Thumb Wedding was where they took first graders and they dressed them up in little ball gowns and little top hats and things. And I played the groom in the Tom Thumb Wedding. They got married, and the parents all paid 10 cents to come in and sit and watch the kids march down the aisle and stand in procession and have a fake minister pretend they married them. And then they'd repeat that 3 times during the evening. And so that was my first thing. I was a little groom in Tom Thumb Wedding. And then we had a dance group or an acting group. Well, if you could afford 10 cents a week, you got to go to Miss Jiating's expression class. And Miss Jiating's expression class taught you little speeches and little things like this. And then she also did at Christmas time in one of the theaters, between the show, they would do a vaudeville act, and we were the little Winter Wonderland or something like this. We'd all have muffs and hats and little capes on, and we would walk around. So I was addicted way back then. My father, unfortunately, hated it. He was a doctor, a very well-known doctor, and I was to be the doctor in the family. There were 4 boys, and I was the one that he thought had the personality that could be a doctor. So he and I did not get along the entire time we were growing up. I was growing up. Only later, when we finally realized we hated each other, we said, what can we do about it? And we started becoming friends. But he was a very strong personality, and I'm a very strong personality. And it was funny because I have been in theater from the time I was 6 years old in one form or the other until I'm 80 next year, November. And I have never done anything except theater. And he hated theater completely. But the one time when I did take another job for 2 weeks, he came down and he looked at me. He said, "Oh, this is killing. Stop that. Don't, get back in and do what you want. I cannot rescue you, but I can guarantee you and your family will never go hungry, and you'll always have a place to stay. That's all I can give you. But now's the chance. Whatever you want to do it." When did I start writing? Well, I was in college, and I had a professor that I was supposed to do a report on what it was like in the ancient Greek theaters, the ancient Roman theaters, at the Greek and Roman. And so I decided, okay, I'll write as though I am a person going to that festival. And so I described I described what it was like going through all the vendors, through the things, and going in to watch the play and having it, both actors on the stage shouting their lines. And it was so exciting, the costumes and all. And after I turned it in, he said, "You ought to be a writer, Paul." And so I thought, oh, okay. So they had a competition for writing a musical. So I quickly wrote a musical in 2 weeks and had some friends write some music to put it in, and we won. So I got to produce a musical, Tempest in a Teapot, I think it was called. It was absolutely dreadful. But it actually, I directed it, we produced it, and we had full sets and costumes, and it ran for 2 nights, and it was wonderful. I was very fortunate to be at a school where whatever you decided you wanted to do, they were very tough, but they would say, "All right, go ahead, you can do it." So that was my first musical and my first writing. I love theater and always loved theater because secretly, in the heart of hearts, I knew I was really weird and something was really off. I didn't know the term gay then, but I really realized that I was not your normal little boy. And when I was a teenager, it really became frightening because I went to a psychiatrist. Well, I finally told my parents when I was in my 20s, I said, or to begin 19 to 20, I said, I think I'm gay. And my father said, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Now, my father was a fix-it, and I am a fix-it with my daughters. But he said, so he got me a psychiatrist to go to. And the psychiatrist said, look, I'm an oddball. I'm one of those people that actually believe that when you're born this way, that's just the way you're born, and you're going to be gay whether you want to or not. I didn't want to be gay. I didn't know any gay people, except creepy little old men. So I didn't want to be anywhere like that. And he said, all right, let me give you the alternatives you got. Right now, the alternatives for being gay, if they arrest you, is lobotomy, electroshock treatment, institutionalization with the criminally insane, or you move out of town. You're given a one-way ticket out of town. And I would suggest if you're going to do that, you go to New York, or you go to Hollywood or San Francisco, where people accept that kind of thing, sort of. Well, I didn't want to. And he said, or you can fake it. I don't recommend faking it, but that's what most people do. Well, I started faking it. I decided I didn't want to go. I was terrified of leaving my family. So I became the straightest little arrow in the quiver. And I, 6 months later, met a girl and fell in love with her, and we got married. All the time I knew this was really difficult. So, but we had 29 years of really, and I loved her. And we had 2 daughters. I wouldn't trade them for the world. And we moved across the country with my writing. But there was always something missing. And so that was when I finally came out. She, of course, got married again. And I ended up meeting a man the next year, the first man I ever dated, and I married him. So I've been with him for 25 years and with her for almost 30. So I am a monogamous man. I like to be married. And I write about those issues now, basically, but all as comedies so that people enjoy and are not beaten over the head with the drama. So that's basically my writing. My process is to write. First, I have to have an idea, and I have thousands of ideas. I used to be when I was writing for TV and film. I could come up with the script and write it in a week's time, and it was brilliant. And everything I ever wrote for television was always optioned. We bought houses on my options, but they were never produced. I had one movie that was done, and it was such a nightmare result that I wanted to take my name off of it. But I think that's why I refused to ever go to meetings. I would option my script, and then I stayed away from it, which is a very disastrous, bad thing to do. And they would get chopped down, so they would never get fully produced. My process in writing is I get a story and I mull it over and I mull it over and I work it and I work it in my mind and I work it and I'll jot down some ideas, and then I just have to start writing, and I sit down and I write about 40 pages and fast. I mean, just bat out of hell. And then all of a sudden the characters seem to know where they're going. And then I start from scratch again with those characters, and I add whatever I've got. Some of it works, some I change. I've had characters appear in my scripts that I have no idea why they're there. And they literally, someone will say, well, that character wouldn't have said that. And I said, but they did. They did say that, because they actually, I literally felt like someone was taking over my body and writing them for me, because I just was flowing. And if I had to quit at the end of the day, I would write a couple of paragraphs about where it was going the next day, and then I'd stop. And I always had to stop because I was taking care of the kids at the time. So I was working at home, my wife was working out, and I was the caregiver at home, the whatever you call them, the stay-at-home dad. And I had to pick them up at school at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And so I'd pick them up at school, then that was their time. And then that night I'd go back to writing some more, but at least at that cue, then I would start 2 pages back and start editing what I'd written for the, until I got it to the point where it was new, and it would just start flowing again. And I was very lucky in that I had the best agents in town. I had William Morris, creative artists, ICM, everything. I had Eisenbach Green, all these huge things. But when I got to LA, even though I had done over 50 shows outside of LA, I was a beginner, and I was 45 years old. They could sell my work, but they couldn't have me at the meetings because all the producers were 30 years old, and they didn't want an old fart there. They were afraid of us. So finally I had William Morris say, well, isn't she, how old is she? About 16, 18? Why don't you send her in and say she wrote the pieces? And my daughter at that stage thought I couldn't do anything right, so I wasn't about to send her in. So anyway, turns out she's a very good writer. But then I found out that they were turning my scripts in with other writers. In fact, I got called by a particular writer, and he said, I've gotten a show I can't do. I can't produce. I mean, and CBS wants me to do it. It'll be go to a new series. It's a pilot for a new series. And I just don't have time to do it. Would you write it? And I said, well, what do I get credit-wise? He said, well, I'll pay you the $60,000 for the pilot, and which is what they're paying me, which is good, was good money back then, really good money, and I needed it. But you can't get a credit for it. But if the show takes off, you will be I'll put you on the writing staff. So I thought, okay, I said, what's the story? Because I needed the money badly. I'd have written porn if they wanted it to raise my family, get my family fed. And so he started describing it, and he went through, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I said, that's a great idea. I really appreciate it. But it's already a script called, and I named off the script because I wrote it. And there was this pregnant pause, and he said, see why you'd be so good to write the pilot? And I said, no, but my attorneys are going to be really happy to see it when it comes on. So he had to call CBS and say he couldn't do the project, which meant he was persona non grata. And my agent, I called him and said, what in the hell happened? He said, oh, well, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know how that possibly happened. Then I realized we both had the same agent. And then 2 weeks later, I got a letter from William Morris that they were reconfiguring what clients they were taking, and they would no longer be able to represent me. So I was out. And that was the end of my theater career. Fortunately, well, not fortunately, I was taking temp jobs, anything I could, but I was working in like a Disney in accounting or in something like that. And I believe in religious science, which is a belief that whatever you think, you can create. So I went to class one day, and I said, I just am so disgusted. And she said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, I'm a writer. She said, no, that's what you do. Let's figure out let's get you the good job. So she sat down and she said, what do you want your job to feel like? So I gave her one of travel. I want to be able to use my theater. And she wrote it all on the board. She said, not so fast. And she wrote it all down on the board. And she said, okay. And I said, I want to be respected. I want to be in charge and not have some secretary tell me that, they didn't think so-and-so would say something. And she said, okay, you want to be, but you'll be work with a team. Yes, I love being a team leader. I love working with a team. We went through 20 things. She said, okay, now that's all the thing. I said, yeah. She said, and look at it closely, read it down. Is everything there? And I thought, and I said, travel, I like to travel, but someone else paying for it. And I've got to make at least $60,000 because that was what he had offered. And she said, oh, no, that's too limiting. What do you want your money for? And I said, I never want to have to think or worry about money again. If I want it, I have it. It's always coming in. I never look at my accounts. It's just there. And she said, okay. And she said, now, if this comes, will you take it? It may not come in how you look at or how you think it's going to work, but will you take it? And I said, yeah. And she said, are you sure? Look closely at that list because it may come. It will come. And I said, what do I do? Do I fold this? Do I write this down? Do I put it in my pillow? Do I slip it behind a mitt? What do I do? And she said, no, it's done. The job's already on its way. And I said, when will we get there? And she said, well, I don't have time, but it will be quickly. But you may not recognize it, but listen, if it sounds anywhere close to this, keep listening. So I thought, oh, great. So I went back to Disney that day, after that next day, to answer the telephones and do the things that I had to do in the accounting. And all of a sudden, this friend called. And she said, Paul, I've been offered this job and I can't do it. They need a producer for a theme park. I think it'd be perfect for you, but I can't do it. I've got a job. Just call them and see what it is. A week later, I swear to God, a week later, I was on a plane to Japan as a producer for Landmark Entertainment. I forgot to mention I'd like them to speak English. That was one thing I did not put in my list. But I ended up there with 10 other producers, and we had 6 months to finish the world's largest indoor theme park. And I was in charge of animatronic figures. So in this one section, and I was traveling all around the world, but I had a team, but we had 6 months or Landmark had to start paying back the money they'd gotten. And I didn't have the slightest clue what to do, but I had a project manager, and together we sat down and said, okay, how do you finish a theme park? What do you do? And we learned it by going to each member of the team that had already been there, who hated us, by the way, because they had been working for 2 years and couldn't get it finished. And we were supposed to come in 6 months, finish it up for them. But it worked. And the park opened on Pearl Harbor Day. They wanted to open, and we had to be gone by that day. And the park opened, and it's still open today as a very big amusement park called Sanrio Puroland. And I went back last year with my husband and some friends, and we went back and toured Sanrio Puroland. It was beautiful. And that was 35 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Once Sanrio was over, I went with Disney Entertainment, and then got sent to just momentarily to do things in their European, the opening of their Disney in Europe and all. Then when that ended, the woman who had called me originally for the Landmark Entertainment, she needed an assistant in one of her projects for her company, which was CMS. She worked for this very dynamic woman named Dinah Zimmerman that was noted for a small company. CMS was Creative Meeting Services, and what we did was shows that were out of the ordinary, productions, industrial shows, stadium shows, anything that was large and big and over $1 million. So we took clients, like all the Fortune 500 clients we had, and I became a producer. And I went in and ended up becoming their head producer, but my stipulation was I will not write for a theme park. I will not write for a corporate producer because I don't understand corporations. No matter what they're selling, I can sell it. You tell me what it is, I'll make it happen. And also, my boss, Dinah Zimmerman, was the most creative woman in the world. And the biggest assignment we did is we had 6 months to turn New York City into a stress-free zone. So we took over 42nd Street, and we did the Cipriani building. And for one block in there, we did one night and one day of big, beautiful, emptied the building out, the Cipriani building out, and turned it into a tropical forest with waterfalls and steam. And lightning would strike. In the rain, there would be rain, and lightning would strike, and the sparks would fly up and start spelling the problems that the client had. And we did this for 20 people that were coming from Europe to do the press and trade magazines. And it worked out beautifully, so beautifully that all of a sudden we had CBS, NBC, ABC, and all the networks and all wanting to come in too. And our people at the door said, well, this isn't open to the public. Well, we want to see what's going on in there. Because outside we had a huge Statue of Liberty with balloons, holding balloons, and we had all these health. And sure enough, I said, start the show again. We're going to do it again for them. We made the evening news all over the world. Their points they went up 1 point in the stock exchange. That woman became known. Nobody knew the woman who was the new head, but she became one of the authorities that you'd see on television, on computer storage, and it was really a great event. We had a wonderful time. We had to load it in within 2 days, and we had to take it out in 1. So it was a rough go, but it was 7 days a week for 6 weeks, getting it ready and preparing it. But my boss came up with the idea, and then my job was to make it work. So we were a good team. And then when that ended, my husband said, I retired, and which was not taken very well, but I retired. And my husband said, now why don't you do what you want to do? So I started writing, and the first play I had was Finding the Burnett Heart, which was actually about my father and his beliefs and a kid coming out. And it actually opened at the Detroit Rep, which is an equity house, beautiful equity house, for its 100th anniversary, and was voted best play of the season and won all sorts of awards. Then it came to LA for 12 weeks in 2 different theaters. And but it was too daring to be published at that time. So I started writing comedies because I found out that, everyone wants comedies. And so I started writing comedies, and my ex had laughing that I just became an ACT winner, and it has been done all over the world. And the new one, my second one, Making Sweet Tea and Other Southern Secrets, that's being done around the world now. I just did a ghost story for the stage. All of them, though, are comedy, and all of them have a message to them eventually, but they're all very, very funny. You're laughing, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I've just finished one called Odd Man Out. That is going to be funny, and I'm sending it to the producers now. It's basically weird. I thought about if a comet came by, the Odd Man comet came flying by. It's going to circle the Earth twice, and these 4 couples that you get to know are going to watch it and cheer it on as they're drinking and partying. What they don't realize is when it passes, it swaps their genders. So all the men become the women and all the women become the men. But they don't realize it, except one man who happened to be, his pregnant wife had asked for his sweater, so he'd run to get it while the comets were coming. And he is the one now pregnant and is due to have the baby. And nobody seems to think this is unusual, but he's the only one who remembers this is not how things were 2 hours ago. And it's very, very funny. And so I hope to have it out going in the next 6 months or so. See, I just love to write, but my novels didn't do too well. They were always optioned for producers, but producers would get it. They'd all want to do it as a movie, but then it would get tied down in that bureaucracy of the movie industry. My screenplays, like I said, everyone wanted them, but there were all these conflicts about you're too old. Who can we get to write it? Well, it's already been written. Plays are your work of art. You've copyrighted them. They're yours. No one is supposed to change a word without contacting you. And I'm pretty lenient about letting people, if they don't like swear words, they can change that depending on. And I decided to write for community theater, which is a bad word in theater. Everyone goes for New York. But I found out there are thousands and thousands of community theaters. Every community has one. And some are very small and they're pedunks, podunks and things like this, you think. But others have multi-million-dollar budgets. And if they've got $150,000 to $5 million, they're my client. And I will write for them. And as a result, I'm making a very, very good living now in passive income that's just coming in from these theaters, because they may not pay directors, they may not pay actors, they may not pay producers. They pay the writer. So you may not make that $75 to $150 to $200 a performance, but when you get 2 weeks of a show running at $200 a performance, 5, 10, 15, then you're pulling in at least some money. And that's better than I was doing in plays that were optioned, but never produced, So anyway, and then if they'll call and they'll say, we have a very religious group, and that they're worried about the fact that he says damn so much, and he says so-and-so or fuck, can we change that? Yes. I don't care if you say oh poo or oh F word, whatever you want to use, just change it. As long as your community is happy with it, and I want to see them laughing. If they're laughing, that's all that matters. And then I also made a point of making sure that I go to the conventions. There's a group called AACT, American Association of Community Theaters, that when my Exit Laughing won one of their competitions, the first one, I went. Now it was a convention, it cost me $1,000 to go because it was expensive stuff. But when I got there were 300 artistic directors from theaters that had money. And they were doing shows. And I wasn't pitching my shows because I'd know better than do that. I just went to meet them and find out what kind of shows they were doing. I was the only writer there. I was the only writer that was there at all. So I got to know some wonderful friends. So now my shows have been produced all over, and all the 300 people were there pushing my shows, starting, I hear Paul's show did really well. Let's go, and they got it in their theaters. So this is the way. So I learned finally, after retiring at 65, how to promote a show, how to get it produced, how to make friends with no ulterior motive. I'm not trying to get them. I actually like these people. They're theater people. They're my kind of people. And so I have fortunate that I have a publisher that likes my work. That helps. But before I'll send it to the publisher, even, I'll usually send it to some of my producer friends and say, look at this and see whether it works for your group. I also know the audience. And a community theater audience is, well, the ones that have to prove it are women, usually. Maybe a male director, but it's usually a women's reading on the rooming team. 80% of it usually is women. And they're usually in their 40s and 50s. And I look and see how religious the community is, what other type of shows they've done, how daring the direction is, how daring the show is. And then I write And people say, oh, I don't want, I don't write for anybody. I write for myself. Well, I write for myself too, but I want it to be read. I want it to be produced. I want it to have people laugh. If you write a joke, you want people to laugh at it. And I'm so discouraged. We don't get it as much now as we used to. People, I don't care whether anyone enjoys it. I'm writing it for myself. But I'm sorry, if that's what you're doing, go into a closet and play with yourself in there. Don't make us sit and watch it. I'm not there to watch you spew your venom against everybody, unless you have a point you want to make. Now, theaters are becoming much more daring now. They will actually do stories like on transgender. And I've written several comedies on transgender, which started out as very funny and became very serious. And they were really worried that the communities were scared of doing it. But what they found out is the older people, especially, that they thought would walk out and be really offended, are the ones that isn't nice. That isn't fair. No one should pick on those kids like that. That's ridiculous. And they're the ones that you want to reach, because they influence their own children, their own grandchildren, their own. And now you don't have problems with the youngest generation. But right now, I like to write transgendered characters, and even if they're just minor, going in just as relevant, they don't even transgender doesn't matter anything, or gay doesn't matter. They just are that. Because right now, transgender and gays are the prime targets for being beaten up and murdered. They don't put it on TV, but about every 8 days, another transgender person is killed. And that beats the Asians, that beats the Blacks, that beats everybody else. That's 4 times more than anyone else in the world. And this is why Pose, the TV show Pose, has been so important to me. I just love that, because it's presenting a world. I hope it has a good effect. We'll see. But my plays, I will have people call and say, well, I actually now understand what's going on. But I was laughing, and I couldn't believe I was laughing at some of the situations they found themselves in. And I said, yeah, they are funny, but they're also very tragic. And that's what I wanted to present. But humor is the main thing I try for in almost all of my pieces. When I first, at 65, started writing plays, I started doing research, which was how a novel. My daughter, who's in media, said, why don't you try to find out what people want before you write it? At that time, I was just writing and pouring stuff out. But Alliance of Lost Playwright was a group that just did Playwright. And so I thought, okay, I need to be a part of this. If I'm going to do it, like the Dramatist Guild, I need to join that. But I was so surprised, because Dramatist Guild, at that point, you didn't do anything. You just paid them money, and they were there to do your. But when you got to ALAP, they had parties. And I thought, okay, let's go to a party. Well, while I was there, I met a writer. Well, I didn't know anybody. I was very quiet, if you can believe it. But I went in, and there was a writer that came in, Peter Colley. And Peter Colley, I've learned later, made his living writing plays. And that was who makes a living writing plays, but he did. And he came in, and he was upset because the theater that was producing his show, I don't have the details and all, but they only brought in $8,000 that night. And he thought the play was not pulling in a big enough audience, because it was a 500, 800,000 seat audience theater. And of course, I hadn't done anything that had been done in a 90 seat theater. 45 seat was big. So I asked him, I said, how do you make a living with a theater and theater? And he said, okay, what do you do when you write a play? And I said, well, I write it, and then I send it out, and then I start writing another. And he said, wrong. This is a business. You don't have the right to write a new play until you've gotten that first play produced. And I went, oh, shit. Are you kidding me? And he said, no. Or you at least have to have a commitment that someone is going to do that play. And I said, what do you do? And he said, well, at that point, they didn't have internet and stuff like that as much. And he said, send out copies to theaters and to see if they'll look at it. But he said, do your research. Look at every one of those theaters. Find out what kind of shows they do. Pick which one of the shows that they've done that's been a success. And also, I've learned from him, look for reviews. How successful was that show in that community? Look for that and then see which one of those shows your show is like. So if they liked Neil Simon, they're going to love Exit Laughing. If they like so-and-so, the Dracula, they're going to love Screams in the Night. So I started doing that, and I sent out 50 scripts. Well, actually, I sent out 40. I chickened out the last 10. I couldn't find any more theaters, and it didn't come back. But I started writing after I sent out the 40 and started writing my next play. And it was 9 months later that I got a call from Detroit reps saying they wanted to do Finding the Burnett Heart. And I had learned in Burnett Heart it was a big hit in Detroit, but it was coming to LA to be done. And I realized it was not going to work in LA because people in Detroit, especially in the all Black community, gay was a hot topic. But when I came here, there are more gays here. It's not such a hot topic. So I took out a complete character and rewrote it. It's still about the relationship of a grandfather and a grandson and the hatred of being homophobic. But it became a big hit here, but I had rewritten it and knocked off 20 minutes of it to tighten it. And it ran for 6 weeks in the little Missing Piece Theater, and then ran at the Lillian for another 6 weeks. And great cast. And the cast went on to do shows that have on television for ages, including The Marvelous Miss Maisel. Our kid ended up being in that show as a standard character. So my plays are good, but I am continually rewriting them. Several years ago they did it, and I turned in a show that won the best play, the big full-length play. And I'm reworking that play now to send out. But it was a rough draft, but it won, and we did a production of it, and it dealt with a transgendered a young boy who was thrown out by his mother when he was 16, and he came back at 32 as a woman. And he realized he has kidney failure, and he's dying, and he needs to find out who his father was. Well, it turned out his mother was raped, and therefore she has no idea who the father was. So he has to now win her over. Well, she has to win him over because he hates her so badly, and be willing to give her kidney a chance to keep him alive. But the trick in the thing was she was a married woman. The transgendered woman had met a man. He had never known that she was a man. She had been completely surgically, and she was now a full woman. And she was listed and registered as a woman, so she was allowed to get married in the current term. And so she and he were married. He knew she was transgendered, but he had never known her as a man. So he was getting to know what she was like as a young boy. And there was no real emphasis put on it. It was just she was married. She was a woman. And her mother had to see that actually she had done very well. She'd become a very famous author. And so the mother ended up wanting to help her finally, and wished she had not thrown her out when she was young. They needed some short plays for the festival. the ALAP Festival and the Gay Pride Festival, and I'm nothing if not a gay pride. So I thought a 10-minute play, I don't write 10-minute plays very often, but this one was kind of an interesting challenge, and I gave myself a day and a half to write it. And it was basically myself at my age remembering when I first came out and how I came out. And I went back to the fact that we had maids back in the South. I had a maid named Millie, and Millie was the only person I could really talk to. So when I was 12 years old, I remembered going back while she was ironing and sitting every day while she was ironing, and we'd sit and we'd talk. And Millie just loved me, and she'd cook cakes and cookies for me, and she'd take care of me. But her life was not easy. She took a bus in 30 miles every morning, and she spent from 9 o'clock or 8:30 till 5 o'clock with us, fixed our 3 meals, cleaned the house, did the laundry and all. And then when my mother got home, my dad got home, then she went off and went back to her own home to do her own thing. And so I used to ask her a lot of questions, and because I was very curious about what it was like to be Black, what it was like to be. But I also several times in that asked her if she'd ever liked a woman. And so this is basically me, her coming to conclusion that I might end up being gay, and trying to say it was okay with her. She would not hold that against me. And for me not to tell my parents, and for me not to tell anyone, for me to keep it a secret, which I did for another 10 years. But she was a very big influence in my life. And it's basically a tribute to this woman. It's called Memories from My Southern Youth. And it's me remembering back, being that age, and talking to Millie. And the actress who plays Millie is absolutely, Leigh Bass is really a brilliant, brilliant actress. And my grandson is playing me as a kid. Just a moment in time and how far we've come, and also the fact that I wanted them to see what it was like in that period of time in the late 50s to be Black, to be a kid, to be gay, and the fact that everyone has a way of dealing with it. But it was just a moment in time, and it's a very poignant moment. What's interesting is that I've done several readings of it, trying it out with different actors and working it out in some of the writing groups. And unanimously, everyone wants Millie's story to continue on. They want it to be a full-length play. They want to know what this woman was like, and she was a very interesting woman. In many ways, I'm looking, when I go to this Pride Festival and when I watch this Pride Festival, it was always enjoyable when you went. Now that it's going to be online, and Zoom takes some of the contact away from it, but we're getting out of that now, thank God. So I am anxiously waiting to see what the other plays are. I know a lot of the writers. In fact, I probably know most of the writers now. People should go and tune into this. One, it's free, I believe. And the other thing is you get a view of these writers' views of their gay life or their gay history. So much has changed in my lifetime. I mean, it's gone from lobotomy. You're going to have a lobotomy to getting married. And I've been happily married to a woman. I've been happily married to a man. And I actually, it's a whole different world. But I'm just think everyone should know whether you're to be gay friendly, because we need to have more people on our side so that it becomes just natural. In fact, there's a lot of flack right now in the gay community because we're no longer isolated. We can move into society. And the churches, especially the people who are very religious, ought to find out that God doesn't make mistakes. We're here, and we are love people, and we take care of people. And you have good ones, good gays, and you have bad gays. But basically, most of them are wonderful, wonderful people that just we didn't choose this life. No one would choose to be abused. No one would choose to be the outcast, to be someone that no one wants to talk to. No one chooses that. You don't choose to have anyone. You want to be like everybody else, and that's all every gay person wants, is just to be. Look at me as a human being, as a man, as a woman. Not because I'm gay. That's just one point. I don't go into your bedroom. Don't go into mine. Look at how I fall in love. Look at how I laugh. Look at how the things that make me laugh. Look at the people we meet. Look at the life we live. And look at how much good we've done. How many great artworks, how many sculptures, how many buildings have been built by us, how many plays have been written by us, how many actors you're watching now on television that are gay, but you don't know it. Or you do know it now because they've come out. How many Olympic stars we've got. How many football players, how many basketball players, baseball players. And there are hundreds. But they like to come out so you finally, they don't have to live in a lie. And that would be a reason for watching it. Become on our side. Help us. We need more support. There need to be more voices in the community heard. And by more voices, I mean different ethnicities. The belief is that most theater was written by straight white males. Well, they weren't straight, a good many of them. They were gay, white males, but they were white males, and our whole world has changed. I love the East-West Players because I get to see writers of the Asian community who are writing, and they're beautiful stuff, and their plays go to Broadway. They go all over the place. But the rest of the world needs to see this too. We need Black theater. We have the feeling that the Black experience can only be written by Black writers. Well, if that's the case, if we need to know about the Black experience, we need Black writers writing, and we need audiences going to see their work. Now, I think the trick for that is to not make all your writings so heartrending that you're just getting every venomous thing out of your system. Follow the example of a lot of people of dealing with it lightly and letting people slip into where they, Allison, understand what you're talking about. When you look at A Trip to Bountiful, it's about an old woman who's trying to get home to her where she lived from a nursing home. It's a Hortonfoot's light comedy and drama, but it is a drama, and you also learn what she's gone through in her life, what it's been like in her life, and you sympathize with her and you fall in love with her. And I think the same thing happens with comedy. Comedy needs to be have meat to it. Sitcoms just laugh, and they have a rule: every 30 seconds there has to be another laugh. When you write for theater, there's laugh, but there's underlying stuff, and there's no reason that every ethnic group can't do that. I would love to see more Black plays, more Asian plays, more Spanish plays. What happens, though, is the Spanish plays like that we're doing here, I was so thrilled because downtown LA had the theater, but the plays were done in Spanish. So since I don't speak Spanish, I couldn't really enjoy them. I would go a couple of times, but there needs to be a chance to blend. I had this big thing of starting a theater where we would do classics done half Spanish, half English, so that you got the whole thing. Because I knew a comedian years ago in Hawaii that was the funniest woman I had ever heard in my life. And she did her show half in a third Hawaiian, third Japanese, a third English, so that she was telling this wonderful hour-long presentation, and the audience that was blended, there were 500 people, they were laughing hysterically. And then I realized I didn't understand half of what she was saying, but I got the joke because she threw in enough lines that I knew where she was going. And I thought, wouldn't that be wonderful if we could do that with theater, so that you go in and you're watching it, and it would take some reworking and some rewriting, but the audience, everyone would be laughing at the same joke at the same time, because they're getting it, they understand the situation, and they hit it at the same time. That's why I think everyone ought to have as many people writing as possible, even though that's competition for me. But I've had my day. The only way to find out what's going on in theater is to join a group like ALAP, because ALAP is an alliance of Los Angeles playwrights, but actually it spread all over the world. There are writers from Europe, there are writers from New York, there are writers from Florida, all that belong to ALAP. ALAP helped create the rules and protections for people that are being used by the Dramatists Guild now. Their attorneys followed what ALAP did. ALAP wrote it first because we were dealing with plays and in a community that was very litigious for film, but we didn't want things to be rewritten, and we wanted people to be paid for their work. So the founders of ALAP, and I'm a lifetime member there, but I was definitely not a founder, but they actually created a lot of the laws and rules around theater that are now used all over the world. Also, when you go to their group meetings and you go to their pitches and you go to their events, you're dealing with other playwrights. You can talk to other playwrights who suffer the same way you do, who laugh the same way you do, and who work the same way you do. So it's really wonderful to have a chance to meet a Peter Colley, who will tell you, what do you do? Here's what you do. Now, I sat down with one time was sitting in the corner of one of Dan Berkowitz's parties, and someone said, well, what was the first thing you ever wrote? And I said, oh, years and years ago, I wrote a thing called Ledge, Ledger, and Legend. And he went, oh my God, you're kidding. I played in Ledge, Ledger, and Legend when I was in high school. Oh my God, I have a friend that played so-and-so. Can I take your picture? Because I want to send it to him and say, you will not believe this. I'm sitting in front of the writer of Ledge, Ledger, and Legend. And I found out at the times that I wanted to do it here in LA. I decided I'd finally do it here. And I was looking for a theater to do it in. And I went to the Tiffany Theater, which was a very, very good theater at the time, to see if we could do Ledge, Ledger, and Legend and another show together. And the manager of that theater said, oh my God, I was in that theater in college. I was in that play in college. And they were reciting lines that I had written. And it turns out Ledge, Ledger, and Legend was one of the most produced plays, 25 produced plays in the last 50 years. So the first thing I ever wrote, which I lost in the mail, and then it showed up 2 years later, and I then submitted it, and it was published within 2 weeks, and it's been used all over the world. ALAP's important to this community, to LA itself. We are a film community, but surprisingly, we had more before COVID. We had almost more theaters than New York. We bring in money. We help support the community. When you get a show up, people come to it. They have dinner. They go out to dinner, and then they go see a show, and it becomes, we spend money like everybody else. But we bring people together. I don't know why most shopping centers don't have a playhouse integrated within their thing, because it'd be a key thing of having people come in for the evening. They eat in the restaurant there. They go shopping while they're waiting, and then they go see a show, and they come out feeling good. Especially if it's a show that does comedies or burlesque or things that are campy and fun, or even thought-provoking. We bring money to the community. And also, a lot of the movie stars keep their craft up by doing our shows and being in our shows and being disciplined enough so that when they show up on set, the lines are down, they have everything ready. And biggest thing is we are part of this community. And for every production that's done, there are 50 people backstage and back behind it that are working it. And they're working it for love of the art here in LA, or for money because they're being paid, but more for the love of the art. And they're getting money and they're spending money in the community, and you should support the community because we are the community. ALAP programs that I enjoy the most going to, they have a meet and greet where you get to actually pitch to theaters companies around town. And what you do is you have a 2-minute to give your spiel. The theater tells you what they like, and then you pitch what your new play is and why they should like it. And then you get to go and have cocktails with those people and talk to them and go around and say, I'm willing to give you the script. I'm willing to let you see the script. And it's just fun to do. And for new writers, it is a chance to meet people. And everyone who's a writer needs to be promoting their work continuously. But you need to have a writers group. You need to belong to a writers group. And ALAP is not a writers group, but it's your connection to 4 or 5 really good writers groups that are free or minimal cost. And they meet every week so that you get to hear your work by professional actors reading your work, and you get to hear, and all of a sudden they critique it and they tell you, I didn't understand this. Well, you don't have to, if you think they're an idiot, that's fine. But if 2 or 3 people say the same thing, something's wrong with your script. And your job is to make it so that even with the worst actors in the world, the message gets through, the laughs get out. And so you want to rewrite and tighten everything. You want nothing that takes the audience out for even a second, because if they're out for a second questioning something, they're out for 2 minutes. And that's 2 minutes they're not hearing your play. They're sitting there going, wonder why that person said that. Well, that you don't want. Let people catch that and warn you about it so you can take it out or rewrite it or rework it so that it's better. And this is why I'm always rewriting my pieces. I'm rewriting them every day. And I'll check it again and again. And when I hear a reading, I'll go through and I'll scratch off things. When I was working with a play that was doing a world premiere, and they were right in the midst of one of the scenes, I said, excuse me, can I stop it and say, who wrote this shit? And they said, you did. And I said, well, I wrote it wrong. That line and that line it just clods things up. It runs it kills the speed of the film. Take that line out, take that line out, take that line out, and see, is that art better? And they said, oh, thank God, it's much easier that way, because then it flowed. You get right to your point. So always be looking for things that keep people invested. I don't want people, once they come in and they get to know the characters, to ever leave the show. And then you want to change their minds if you can. I've got one story I want to tell, if you let me, and then you don't have to put it in. When I was doing in Detroit, the audiences, mainly Black, and they are used to being vocal in their appreciation. And this is what it's like being in Shakespeare's time, where they talk back to the actors. And they loved the dynamics between this grandfather and this grandson that were living in the same room and having to share the same room, and the different age. And they picked at each other and all, and they always was laughing and staring. You go, kid. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the grandson, it's revealed he's gay. Whoa, you could hear them back up. And then they were against the kid, and they were just almost booing him. It was just horrible. And then the mother comes in, and the mother is adamant. She's furious that her son is, how can he be this way? And she disowns him and wants him out of the house. And that's the end of Act 1. The audience, you could hear the women going, whoa. And on the way out into the audience, I was sitting listening, they kept saying, you don't throw your kids out of the house. I don't care what they did. if they're in jail, you keep them. If you don't do it, you don't do it. Being gay, well, he's still the same kid. You don't throw him out. So when they came back in, the mother whom they had always loved, and they didn't like her as much anymore. And the kid was being so battered and beaten that every time the grandfather tore at him, they didn't like that either. And pretty soon, the kid was trying to establish why he was the way he was, and they were cheering him on. And at the end of the thing, the mother said to the son, "Where do you think you're going?" And he said, "Out, where I should have been the entire time." And the audience cheered. And when the curtain calls came, they cheered the kid and the grandfather, because he had turned a leaf and became the kid's best supporter. But the mother, who was a favorite actress in that theater, they booed her. And it was funny because the producer said, "I have never seen a play that the audience goes from one side to the other of the spectrum." Churches wanted to prove that we were wrong, and they sent audiences to fill the house. We had full houses for the entire 6 weeks there. They sent high school students. It became a big, big thing. And the high school students would jeer that kid, harass him the entire way through until the second half. And then by the time this one girl just kept on harassing, and finally this one boy next to her said, "Will you shut the plank up?" And she did. And they also cheered him on. And so that made me feel like something had been learned, because they realized this was a kid. They liked the kid. They'd liked the kid before. He just was gay. They liked him. He had never been gay. He just knew that that's what he was. And they liked the grandfather. So theater has power. It can move people. Now, it's interesting because that play has not been published because they were afraid to do it at the time. And now it's probably old hat. But Finding the Burnout Heart is really won Best Play of the Season in Detroit, and won Best Cast, Ensemble Cast, and Best Writing. So I was thrilled for my first major thing. I appreciate this chance to talk to you. My name is Paul Elliott, and I am a writer, in case you hadn't. And I would love for you to come to the ALAP Pride Festival and watch us and perform. And I'll be there. I would be there in person, but I'll be there online to watch and cheer everyone on. And I want you to join us to learn something with us and be with us and laugh with us. And I appreciate this chance to talk to you.